Family business makes no sense. So let's talk about it.
Welcome to another episode of Family Business Makes No Sense, where we explore the themes behind why it is people put families into businesses to make a family business, when the concept of family and what makes it successful is so fundamentally opposed to the concept of business and what makes them so successful. So when we have those fundamental oppositional success factors, the inevitable consequence for just about every family business is going to be conflict of some form. And what we're going to talk about is 50 common causes of conflict, with one topic covered in each episode. And we're going to explain why that particular topic is a common cause of conflict, the conflicts it causes, and more importantly, what you can do to prevent conflict occurring in your family business, and how you can deal with the conflict if it has occurred notwithstanding. I'm Jon Kenfield, the Family Business Solutionist, broadcasting from Melbourne in Australia. I've been working with business families of all shapes and sizes for a great many years. And one of the things that I've learned is the vast majority of conflicts that basically put the whole system of family and business into a wobble, or even make the wheels fall off completely, are not down to commercial financial problems. They're more to do with emotional relationship issues, and therefore a traditional approach that looks at rational, logical, legal, threat-based responses, often involving emotional blackmail, are far less likely to be a constructive solution to the conflicts that have arisen. Empathic problem solving, solutionism, I believe, is what works a lot better if you want to bring the family and the business out the other side of any conflict workout in better shape than they were in on the way in. Hopefully with a complete plan for future happiness, peace and prosperity. So today's topic is dealing with fossilised leaders. Fossilised leaders is something that I introduced as a concept, must be 15 years ago, to the horror of the majority of advisors that I was working with and ran the ideas past. Because their thinking was, if we say to the person who has perhaps engaged us and almost certainly can control us getting paid, that we think they're fossilised, we may have a very, very short engagement on our hands. So they didn't like the pejorative sound of a leader being fossilised, a person being fossilised. But over the years, most of those guys in various times have come back and said, you know what, now that we think about it and we're seeing it because you've activated our reticular activation system, which looks for patterns, looks for things, and then join the dots together in ways you couldn't do if you had no knowledge, we're beginning to see and understand what we are dealing with, and fossilization explains it pretty well. And because we now have a better understanding of what we're dealing with, it does give us a different way to approach the problem. And what we're going to be talking about today is what causes fossilization, how to spot it, how to respond to it, and most importantly, how to prevent it from happening and how to deal with it if it does happen. If that's of interest to you, please buckle up and come with us. We'll start by defining what we mean by fossilised leaders. What is fossilization? When I coined the phrase, it must be 15 years ago or more, there was zero recognition of it as a condition. Before I put this session together for today, I consulted with my new best friend ChatGPT and asked it what it understood fossilized leaders meant in a family business context, and it threw back at me I suspect some of the stuff I've written about it over the years, but it had a pretty good explanation, which is fairly close to what I'm going to be talking about today. So I get some satisfaction, I guess, from the idea that, at least from my perspective and Chat's perspective, even if the rest of the world doesn't like it, that the idea of a fossilized leader gives us a tool to work with to focus our attention and efforts to prevent it being a problem. And the first thing to say is that fossilization is the process of rusting in place. It's the process of becoming unable to respond constructively to changing circumstances. So it's all about resistance to change. It's not about reduction in mental capacity. And that's one of the things that makes it so insidious and so difficult to appreciate and to understand and to respond to, because the typical fossilized leader would have no trouble passing any legal test for mental capacity. Their brain is still working. We're not talking about early onset dementia or anything of that sort where it becomes obvious. We're talking about something different. So in some ways we can say it may be age related, but since we've seen fossilization in leaders as young as in their 50s, and because there is no obvious physical or practical deterioration in thought process, it's more of a mindset thing. The fossilized mindset might be a better way of looking at it. So it's not purely associated with age, although it tends to come with age. 70 is typically a target date where I think I should be looking for evidence if there are signs that rusting in place is what's happening in a particular family group and or a family business. And what we need to look at is, has the leader effectively stopped being a good leader? Because they are stopping the business and probably their family from adapting to the inevitable changes that take place in both types of organization. Within businesses, we have natural business cycles and a continuous need to refresh the business model, to refresh the business products and services, to refresh relationships, to remain competitive. Within a family, we obviously have the life cycles of birthing, growing up, maturing, taking place, stepping down, all of those things. And as I think is fairly obvious, it's good to think of these in terms of being systems of interconnected parts. And most systems are rarely standing still, because we know that if a business is standing still, it's effectively going backwards in relation to its competitors and in its marketplace. And that's usually kiss of death stuff if that's happening. So what we want to do is look at avoiding fossilization, avoid having fossilized leaders in place beyond their appropriate use-by date. And we see some extraordinary examples now of leadership of some of the world's most powerful countries and also a few middle powers, where the leaders are way beyond the dates that in many jobs we would say there is compulsory retirement. You are beyond the point of 65 or 70, are typically the sort of dates we'd be looking at, where you can no longer hold a key operational role, because we expect there will be some deterioration in thinking, and anyway, for logical dynamic purposes, we need to create space for the next generations to step into, simply so we have a constant refreshing. So whether or not our 70-year-old, notional 70-year-old, is suffering from fossilization, or maybe improving like a fine wine as they simply get older, for the sake of the system working, we need to put in parameters. And arguably some of the turmoil we have in the world at this point in time could have been avoided, would have been avoided, if we had those rules in place for presidents, prime ministers, and various other positions of responsibility that we have in lesser organisations and leadership of entire countries. Anyway, what is the problem then with fossilisation? Well, if you happen to be running a country, there is the potential for global disruption and potential consequences of that. If we're talking about a family, we are talking about creating resentments from upcoming generations who have often been promised and have an expectation of eventually stepping up into leadership roles and not waiting until they're at retirement age themselves to do it. Because this is part of this validation that people need, we can see a progression into a leadership role or a support role for leadership, as opposed to having the old fogies staying there forever and there's nowhere for anywhere else to go. That tends to create cliques in families and break off groups, and people, as we talked about in the previous video, which talked about broken promises and unmet expectations, you create rebels and resenters or submitters, which you just don't want to do. It sets a system into pretty bad shape for possibly years and years and years. Take a look at the Australian political system for an example. So what we really want to try and do is put some strategies in place to prevent fossilised leadership from destroying a business or destroying a family or both. And we want to do it in a constructive way. So if we look at strategies and solutions, the first thing to say is that if you have a sensible plan that people are signed up to, the whole point about transitioning before fossilisation can take place is that it is a celebration of past achievements and a reward to be able to choose to move into a different life rather than feel chained to the throne. So the first thing to do is set up a plan well before you need to implement it as a fundamental for any plan, and then you're in with a good chance of avoiding fossilisation. And that means setting a date in the future where the leader is going to step down or aside to make space for a successor, and everybody, all the stakeholders, both in line within the family, within the business, outside suppliers, any form of stakeholder, it gives them confidence that the business is going to be able to continue, and they haven't got to worry about the person with whom they have the relationship on which their mutual business is based is going to keel over one day and everything's gone. So we're planning to succeed rather than failing to plan, as they say. Benjamin Franklin supposedly said, failing to plan is like planning to fail. So let's recognise that in the natural scheme of things, people like to be where they like to be, obviously. That is within their comfort zone, and I visualise your comfort zone as a rock that you have constructed to your needs and your circumstances, where you feel happy and comfortable that you're in the right place at that point in time. It doesn't mean that you're not under massive pressures and all the rest of it, but it means you're where you're supposed to be. And the whole point about transitioning is we don't want to force people off that rock into the shark-infested custard, swim for your life. Instead, we want to be able to say, we want you to build a new rock, which is a new life, which is not the life you've had that's brought you to where you are, but the basis for the life you want going forwards. And we're going to helicopter you from the old rock when you're ready, and when everybody else agrees to be ready, from the old rock into the new rock, because that's the next phase of your life. And for some people, that's going to mean travel, improve your golf handicap, go fishing, spend time with the grandkids, spend time with your friends, doing all those sorts of things. For other people who are driven to be in business, it might mean directorships, it might be in advisory boards, it might be having a consulting role, special projects back into the business, but you're not blocking the ascension of a new generation of leadership to take over with fresh ideas, fresh energy, and a sense of renewal to keep the business flourishing. And basically the same thing happens in the family as well. So we plan ahead and we use the time to create a new rock. One of the strategies for doing that within a business is to plan where the business is going to go, and then make sure that you've got an organisation chart that sets up the functions that the business will require to achieve those future goals of consolidation or growth or amalgamation, whatever it happens to be. You still need these plans, and you still need to know what it's going to take to be there. And then if you've got proper job descriptions, you can match the people you've got with the roles that are required by the business. And it says the business is bigger than the people, and if we don't have the right people, or we have the wrong people, we need to make changes. And we need to have the courage to make those decisions, which is what having independent boards and proper executive management teams are really all about. This shouldn't be something decided purely by the leader, because they are massively conflicted, and they're also isolated. It's very hard for them to make seriously objective, good decisions that fundamentally they sit in the middle of the consequences of those decisions. So we want to have a plan, we want to have an org chart, we want to have good job descriptions. These don't have to be, and they shouldn't be, the sort of typical task list, a bullet point list. They should be narrative plans to say, this is what your job looks like, and if you're up for it, great. And if you're not up for it, either because it's not what you want to do or it's not what you can do, the business needs it. So we need to put somebody else in that place. What does that mean for you? A different role. It's not personal when you do it that way. Now, if the business leader is so used to running at 1 million miles an hour, or it's even faster in kilometres, and they've given little time over the years to their own needs, and their focus has always been on drive the business, lead the family, and so on, they may need some useful coaching to help them let go of their squirrel grip on their existing rock, existing roles and responsibilities, and help them to visualize a new reality and make that visualization match their desires, within reason obviously, so that they want to be in that different space when the time comes, or even before then, if you can make it work. So it's a joyous transformation. It's not a begrudging or a conflicted transformation. We need therefore to remove the negative stigma of retirement. Retirement basically means to put out of use. And we want to, instead of thinking of retiring, think of refiring. We want people to joyfully move to the next phase in their lives. And we want them to want to make that move at the speed that satisfies everybody else in the equation as well as it reasonably can. And if you put those things in place, you're not going to have a problem with fossilised leaders. And this goes for families, it goes for businesses, it most definitely goes for political parties, it fundamentally goes for any organisation. Comes back into the whole Jim Collins thing. Don't only get the right people on the bus, you must also get the wrong people off the bus as part of the process of making sure that you have the right people in the right seats on the bus. If you can do that, happy days. But what if you can't? What if you haven't done this, or, as so often happens, the family business has made promises rather than plans. One day, this will all be yours. It gets difficult when that promise has been made to 3 or 4 siblings, but it's very commonly made. One day this will all be yours, therefore work hard, don't go chasing the pay, don't question me too much, revere me, love me to pieces, flatter my ego, flatter my sense that I'm protecting my flock, whether or not in a positive way depends, of course. But what if when it comes to it, when push comes to shove, you have got a family business leader who just won't move because they have fossilized, they've rusted in place. And I am seeing, we've talked for many years about the whole baby boomer tsunami of retirements. I'm seeing an awful lot of family businesses with serious conflict issues, which are threatening the family and the business, where leaders are in their 80s and they are absolutely not up to leading. They should not be in that role. It takes very little time to work out, when you've worked with hundreds of other businesses and hundreds of families, that a person is well beyond their salad days, and frankly, they should not still be in a leadership role. So how do you get them to change? I've got to say it's incredibly difficult. Because they're unable to change, they are closed. They don't have a growth mindset. They're closed to the idea that what they think should be happening is not necessarily best for them, and most certainly is not best for everyone else, and very definitely is not what everybody else wants. How do you make that work? My experience about the only way to do it, and it's frequently unsuccessful, is you have to have an ally within the family who can work with that business leader and that family leader to get them to put some time in with a coach or a psych or an advisor or an advisory board member. You need them to put the time in with somebody and who has the skills to make them receptive to the idea of new possibilities. And it takes time to get them to be able to visualize a different life that isn't all about them. For more about that, take a look at the video on narcissism. That isn't all about them, but is all about their happiness and the happiness of those around them and the success of their business. So we're taking them out of their little mindset, fixed mindset, fossilized mindset, into a growth mindset, life after business. If the business is my life, not being in the business is my death, we've got to get rid of that concept. We've got to get them to say, I would love to be able to do this and still have the respect and the prestige and the validation and so on that I need, but doing it because I've done the right thing by everybody, not because I'm doing the wrong thing, and then having the reputation I built over 4 decades trashed because I basically held on beyond the time when I should, and the family and the business has suffered as a result. So good luck with that one. It's a tough one. And I'm seeing more and more and more of it as a necessity, and it will not respond well, although often you get to the point where you have to advise the other family members, you need to look at your legal options here, because you do get a fossilized family leader so stuck in their own heads that they are going to destroy the family and the business unless they can be removed. Try everything else first. If all else fails, get really good legal advice that doesn't aim to win the battles and then bayonet the wounded, but at least tries to be constructive in the way that things are moved on. If you found this useful and you found it relevant to your situation or to the situations of others who you know are in trouble, please give us a like, pass on the links to other people so they can have a look, get some ideas. If you need help, get in touch with us or get in touch with local advisors who specialise in doing this work, and let me tell you, there aren't many. And if you found value, please come back and join us for the next session. Thanks for watching.